Hey, little Jay. Jenny.
Hey, Jenny.
Little Jenny Humphrey.
Jenny Humphreys.
Jenny. Jenny?
Jenny.
Little Jenny Humphrey.
Jennifer Tallulah Humphrey.
Jenny? Jenny?
We need to talk about Jenny. Gossip Girl was one of those phenomenons that took the world by storm in September of 2007. It was an immediate success and it made the front page of many fashion or gossip magazines or websites for the next 5 years for many different reasons, until its ending in 2012. It became a staple of pop culture so gigantic that HBO tried to create a reboot that failed because of how much they missed the mark and what made the original so great. So it's safe to say it doesn't need an introduction. Being a show focused on privileged teenagers on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and being a teenager myself at the time, I ignored it. I wasn't very interested in those shows since I was one of those teens who thought she was better than everybody else, like every other teenager ever, basically. My first contact with Gossip Girl was back in 2014 after one of my friends brought one of the Gossip Girl books to work to read during lunchtime, and I naively said, "Hey, I didn't know they made books of that show." And she said, "No, dummy, it's the other way around." I mean, nowadays it has become a trend to do it the other way around as well, so don't blame me. Well, being a fan herself, of course she was right. There wasn't only one book. There were a total of 14 books. One of them about Blair and Serena being serial killers, which, so anyway, I was really curious about the show and I started watching it. What first drew me to it was the outfits they wore. I watched the first episode, then the second, then the first season, and then the second, and then I stopped watching when I saw Hilary Duff on the show, cause I'm sorry, but her acting at that point hasn't been updated since her Lizzie McGuire days. I mean,
You know what, Vanessa, you don't need to make excuses for him, okay?
That's not true, Gordo. Kate's already got first dibs on most popular girl.
So I turned on the light, and that's when I saw this strange man.
by that time I was already a bit bored of it, and to be fair, the change of setting, meaning most of the characters being out of high school and heading to college, didn't have the same impact to me and I just stopped watching. I came back to it when I started using Netflix a couple of years ago and finished the whole thing during quarantine while it was on Netflix. And if I tell you that the Ivy Dickens saga didn't make me want to throw my computer through the freaking window, I would be lying. During quarantine, I had more time to watch and rewatch the show, and besides noticing the dynamics, the flaws, and the directions that the show could have gone in order to make it from a promise to a joke, I noticed the qualities, nuances, and flaws of all the characters in detail. But one of them caught my attention because there was so much potential in her, and yet she was poorly received and despised by other characters and audiences alike. In my opinion, not always for a good reason. And that would be Jenny Humphrey. Dan's little sister was one of those characters that grew in front of our eyes. We saw her going from a naive and quick-witted fresh-faced freshman from Brooklyn to an Upper East Side grunge god style Bored Queen Bee in her last seasons in the show. There was definitely an interesting story behind such a diametrical change from season 1 to season 3, and that's what we're going to explore in today's video. The peaks, the valleys, the successes and failures of Jenny Humphrey, and why little Jay deserves so much more credit and respect than the one that was being given, especially by the audience. Our first introduction to Jenny was her arriving with Dan from their mother's house at Grand Central, where their father, Rufus, is picking them up. Then we see her a couple of scenes later at the Met steps when she made the invitations for the kiss on the lips party Blair was giving in the pilot. We see her trying to fit into Blair's group by doing errands for them. Although throughout the first season she was happy to do this in exchange for Blair's and the other girls' recognition, as soon as she found out that she would never amount to anything more than being a glorified slave for them,
Pacing stops when I say it stops. And for future reference, only my friends call me B.
she quickly turned her back and used the new acquired information she gotten directly from Serena to get back at her, and climbed the social ladder she desperately wanted to belong to.
I will also ruin you. How are you gonna do that?
As soon as she got the spot she fought for, She found out that belonging required more than just being in the company of people she admired, and she started doing things that made her compromise her values, like her father said.
One that made you feel like compromising your character was a prerequisite to hanging out with
She
him.
stole her stuff, she stole, she lied, and she used and was used by people to preserve her spot among the Upper East Side princesses. All of this unsuccessfully, since Blair was plotting back against her to reclaim her spot as a queen bee. Finally, giving up on her social endeavors, she went back to fashion design, her initial passion, and by the end of the season 1, she got an internship at Eleanor Waldorf's atelier. In season 2, we see Jenny working at Eleanor's atelier by the end of the summer. She had to go back to school, but having found a place to explore her passions and being away from constant Biller's social life and the inevitable bullying she would receive, she started cutting off class and working full-time while she was supposed to be studying, all of this behind Rufus and Dan's back. Eventually, they found out, and Rufus agrees to let her be homeschooled and work full-time. She has a brief affair with Nate while she was staying with the Humphreys and a disagreement with Vanessa over him. After some time working at Eleanor Waldorf, she feels she's not being appreciated enough, even though she knows she has an evident talent, and she quits working with her too, by making her own line with the help of one of the models. Situation that also backfires when Agnes, the model, shows up to be unreliable and irresponsible when Jenny sacrificed the relationship with her family and friends for this idea.
I left home. I quit my job. And my dad, he basically hates me.
So much so that she ends up leaving home and then coming back again, and to Constance Billard again when her project didn't work out. Coming back to school, she is committed to keeping a low profile and focusing on her studies, and also seeing people outside of her usual social circle, passively and then actively rejecting the life she previously wanted. All of this until Rufus married Lily, and then she officially became an Upper East Side princess, and on graduation day, Blair made her officially the new queen bee of Constance. In season 3, she's enjoying the perks of being part of the high society, while at the same time trying to get rid of the structures that were in high school for a long time, only to be faced with the fact that these structures were bigger than her thanks to Blair, even now that she was a queen, and that the best way to survive to them is to adapt to them, aka either be queen or be nothing, which led her to slowly push Eric, that was her only genuine friend, repeatedly, and also everybody else away. She became colder, controlled, and a slave of the structure that she was desperately trying to get rid of, pushing away her passions, her dreams, and everything that was dear to her and cemented her identity and her drive for a long time. By episode 9, you can see how keeping up with these demands are wearing her off and making her more conniving and unforgiving.
Well, since you apparently love your new bag more than your old friends, I guess you can carry it. Across the street. Enjoy being BFFs with a hunk of leather.
At this point, she meets Damien, a friend of Chuck's, who ends up being a dealer and involves Jenny in his business. She eagerly accepts since she mentions she's lonely and bored, and during the process, she falls for him, even though he's only using her. After some time, he ends up pressuring her to be more intimate with him, and everyone around her is trying to protect her from Damien, even when she's lashing out at them for it. Finally, she finds out he's not really into her, and she comes back home. With the help of Rufus, she comes back to Eleanor Waldorf's atelier, where she finds Agnes again. She successfully finds her path back to being a fashion designer until Agnes, who was trying to get back at her, sabotages her efforts by drugging her and leaving her in a bar where Nate finds her and rescues her. She falls for Nate again and tries to unsuccessfully separate him from Zarina. In a moment of loneliness where she realizes she has no one to turn back to, she sleeps with Chuck, who is in the same mindset after breaking up with Blair. Blair finds out they slept together and tells Jenny to leave the city for good. This signifies the exit of Jenny and Taylor Momsen from the show as a main cast, only to come back occasionally for 1 or 2 plot lines where she's mostly used as an enemy. Moving forward to the season finale, 5 years in the future, it shows Jenny as a successful designer with her own line called J by Waldorf assisting her brother's wedding. Out of all the characters in the show, Jenny was the one who showed more growth and change during the 3 seasons where she was one of the main characters. This in part because she was the youngest and therefore there were pivotal parts of her life that were being shown. Also because unlike her co-stars who were most of them in their early to mid-20s, Taylor Momsen was the same age as Jenny, and the changes she was showing outside of the show were being reflected there as well, which made her portrayal of the character something more raw and real. Well, realer given the context of the show, which brings me to the next part. As we have mentioned before, Jenny is one of the main characters in the show. She lives with Dan and Rufus in Brooklyn and goes to Constance with Blair and Serena. During the first part of season 1, we notice a fresh-faced Jenny eager to participate in the social life of Constance, working for Blair, occasionally talking to Serena, and befriending Serena's little brother Eric. Here, we not only notice the easy graces she has with people that her brother lacks, but also the willingness to participate and be part of a world that Dan has actively rejected. During the small debates she has with her family, we notice that she's also very witty and socially intelligent.
Dad, this is not a platform for one of your anti-capitalist rants.
I can't concentrate.
Sound of your own voice distracting you? Any idea what you're doing? Not only is it social suicide, Dan, it's mean. Do you really think Serena deserves to be treated like this? Why are you taking his advice? He's old and alone.
What?
Tell Serena again. Without the pregnancy scare, in a quiet, no distractions kind of way.
An intelligence that can be quickly clouded by her naivete and her admiration of a world that seems perfect from the outside. That is demonstrated when she goes to the Kiss on the Lips party where she meets Chuck and he tries to assault her. And also when she's invited to Blair's soiree and she locks her up at her mother's store.
I have my own set of keys. You could watch me lock up.
Before a pivotal part of the show, she realizes that even though she was willing to do a lot of things for Blair and her friends, they were never going to treat her as an equal and she gave up. And when she found out important information that could lead her not only to harm Blair, but to climb up the social ladder, she didn't doubt to use it. It's here when we first notice Jenny's loss of innocence and where her tendencies to use people to get what she wants get more noticeable as time passes by. When she got a more stable position in the previous clique Blair used to rule, she found herself sacrificing a lot of things to keep this position. Not only material stuff like the sewing machine and the jewelry she sold to be able to keep up with her wealthy schoolmates, and also the dress she stole from one of them to be able to afford another one to use on the birthday party, but also sacrificing her own values and principles like lying to her family, betraying the people who want to take care of her, and using people and allowing others to use her to advance her position in school.
You can't make me do anything.
You've already lost my trust. You really want to lose my respect, too.
Sorry.
By the end of season 1, Jenny has admitted that everything she had to do to keep this position in a world that will never completely accept her made her make the decision to throw the towel and go back to who she was. And this is something she will do repeatedly during the show. Although it happens less and less as the show progresses, we notice that it's very easy for Jenny to be lured into a life that looks interesting from the outside until she gets caught in it and finds out that the dream she has longed for all this time has never existed, or it was a very vague idea of what she thought at some point it was. It's easy for her to be enticed by it and believe it better than the life she has.
I'm trying to forget some things too. Mostly how happy I thought I'd be once I made it in this world.
The world you're looking for only exists from the outside. The only reason I survive in it is because I always knew it was empty.
Yeah, well now I know too. I found out the hard way.
The hard way is the only way.
At At the start of season 2, Jenny has become an intern in Eleanor's atelier, and even though she's young and not being treated in a special manner, everyone recognizes how talented she is and how much future she has in the fashion industry. Her passion, her talent, and her proactiveness keep her afloat in a very competitive world where she wants to succeed. She's shown a huge determination to succeed in whatever she puts her mind into, and we can see it generally in fashion, in school, and to prove herself even when there's not supposed to be a need to. In this matter, she is very similar to Blair, and we see why she's eager to be her friend.
You might be privileged, Blair, but you work for every single thing you've achieved. Like me. Serena just glides through.
The difference is that when Blair just wants to have power without any particular aim or using any additional skills besides her academics, her wealth, and the way she controls her image and other people, Jenny is determined, she has practical skills and a defined goal, and her lack of monetary means made her learn how to think fast and work with what she has with and around her. In other words, Blair's goals are strictly social, as most of her activities involve her getting in contact and climbing a new social ladder. Even her going to Yale was more of a social endeavor than an academic one. While Jenny's, although more disorganized and chaotic, are more global, and when she's in a healthy and a more mature mindset, she's centered on how she can make a place for herself in the world instead of making herself fit in. For the most part. And when there's no goal for her, we can see how this affects her personally. Like when she was between fashion and school and had nothing to do but organize records at home, or when she became a queen at Constance and she had virtually nothing to do. She's utterly concerned and focused about what's the next goal to achieve, and when there's no goal, she seems lost and uninterested in everything around her, especially when she feels she has no one else to turn to. In the end, Serena has Blair and Blair has Serena, and it has been like that for years for them. Even though they do horrible things to each other, and I'm not the only one who think that they are both awful friends, the plot always makes them go back to each other either for a force of habit, codependency, or genuine love and support. At the end of something that will be unforgivable in the real world, like sleeping with your best friend's boyfriend or outing a life-altering secret in front of a group of people, they always find a way to go back to each other. Jenny, on the other hand, doesn't have that the same way they do. Jenny doesn't have someone contemporary around that keeps her grounded besides her family. I mean, she does have Eric, but the dynamic that has been established between him and her cannot emulate the same one that Serena and Blair have. Not only because Eric has a backbone and is not afraid to call her out when he has to, but also because it's worth noting that Eric and Jenny's friendship is rather recent, so they don't have the same strong bond that Serena and Blair share. That including the attachment fed by years of friendship that will make S&B dysfunctional relationship a lasting one. Also, in spite of Jenny being the one with the stronger support system behind her, she tends to disregard it in order to obtain something that would make her sacrifice her relationship, her stability, and her own beliefs.
You don't have to do those things, Jenny. You're making a choice.
Do you want me to choose to have no friends?
You don't even have your coat off, and you're already using emotional blackmail to get your way.
Spin it however you like. I just need your signature.
Jenny has a tendency to think that she has nothing to lose by sacrificing what she has and eventually finding out she lost more than what she thought she had. Even though Serena and Blair and the others have grown into privilege, for this same reason they tend to assume it has always been there and tend to focus on the lack of support they have from their families and put all this attention on all the real and long-lasting relationships they have with people in their circle they consider as equals in one way or another. However, since both Dan and Jenny have been thrown into an environment that values wealth and power over family support and stability, they both tend to be discouraged by what they lack instead of seeing it has benefits that their schoolmates don't have. It doesn't help that since the Upper East Side is so focused on appearances, those cracks don't show up until they are very close or in the environment already.
We're Humphrey's, Dad. Not exactly royalty uptown.
Are you okay with that?
No. But I'm used to it.
Jenny has also shown she's not afraid to try. She's willing to learn and in a way to roll with the punches as long as she gets to try to do the things her way. And oh boy, the punches that she had to roll with, because during the show, for some reason the showrunners were having some sort of vendetta against her. When she was trying to be friends with Blair, she learned rather fast that it wasn't the way she was going to be accepted by these people she perceived better in many ways, even if she tried, and she did try a lot. Once that didn't work out, she decided to try with fashion in a very aggressive but decisive way, and once again failed after trying to create her own fashion line, mostly thanks to external influences, mainly Agnes. Things get more complicated after she becomes queen and her recklessness becomes more aimless and impulsive. As I have mentioned before, since she achieved everything she apparently wanted, she's chasing a new and easy high by fooling around with Damien. Jenny herself is a force of nature. She's driven and has an incredible amount of energy and resilience that makes her go through more phases than the other characters. When she has an aim, she's unstoppable whether the aim is healthy or not. If she wants it, she goes for it. And that's great, as long as she has a guiding light who can put her in the right track, which most of the time was her dad. However, either for a lack of a different support figure or just the natural stubbornness that comes with her drive, it wasn't enough for her to be put on the right track, and either the temptation of the city or the lack of support of a social circle ended up wearing her off. She has an imperious need to try to prove herself and conquer her new aim. This was the cause of this incessant need. Her own self-concept wasn't enough for her to feel as valued as she wanted to feel. No amount of encouraging words from her loved ones or inner strength could shake the idea that she needed external validation in order to feel important. And this is why she was always putting herself at risk. Not only that, but she was willing to sacrifice herself and throw her friends and family under the bus in order to achieve her goals. After her own perception of the Upper East Side soured, instead of communicating openly her need to go back to Brooklyn to the life she had before, she pulled a Blair and tried to sabotage Rufus and Lily's relationship with the help of Serena's dad to get her way. She did everything to get what she wanted at the cost of the well-being of her family, friends, and the relationship she had with them. Her portrayal in latter seasons in the show was rather antagonistic, even though she ended up leaving New York to avoid the temptations that came with it. Not only hers, but also Vanessa and Dan's. The reason why these specific characters, who all come from Brooklyn, unlike the other group, were the most hated by fans is something that we will discuss later as well. The Humphrey family is a very supportive one. They are all interested in the well-being and accomplishments of each other. This was possible thanks to an originally strong support that was visibly shattered by the parents' separation. In the scenes before Allison left, we can see that even then, the family was happy and united, and even after she left, Rufus tried his best to take care of the kids. Allison's departure was a huge hit not only for Jenny, but for Dan and even Rufus, who was trying to shelter the kids from the harsh reality. We don't know much about Allison besides what we're told about her. Occasions when it's mentioned she's around or when Jenny travels to see her in Hudson. However, we are told through her conversations with Dan and Rufus that she left to pursue her dreams and left her family behind hoping they will tell her when to come back, which, I mean, ma'am, they're your family. They want you to pursue your dreams. They don't want you to be unhappy, so they don't want to get in the way of your dreams.
Maybe that you promised you would be home by the end of summer, and then you weren't. Maybe the fact that you left at all.
I asked if you were okay with me going away, and I'd hoped that if there was a problem, you would say something.
Like what? Your daughter is a freshman at a school populated by mean girls and date rapists? Why should I have to tell you this?
Although it was a plotline to bring drama to Rufus and Lily's relationship, it's definitive how affected by it were all of them, especially Jenny, who needed a mother to support her, guide her, and understand womanhood, which is something that her brother and her father couldn't do, and it's visible in many scenes how on her own Jenny was in a world that was a mystery to her father and her brother.
It was a project last year, and we all know how that turned out. What?
Nothing. Totally with you. Did you understand any of that? I'm so glad I'm not a girl.
Even as a perceived single father, Rufus did everything on his hand to protect and encourage Stan and Jenny to pursue their dreams, even in a world that was not going to favor them for the lack of means compared to their schoolmates. He did everything in his power to make sure that they are not missing the support, attention, guidance, and an occasional reprimand necessary to keep them on the right track, unlike Lily, who was the complete opposite with Serena and Eric. Even to the point of sacrificing his own dreams and a career revival just to spend more time with them, which was not Lily's case because she left her kids on numerous occasions to go behind her partner at the time, and we see how affected her children were about it. In spite of being surrounded by a shattered yet united and loving family, Jenny was very dismissive of the people that loved her, lashing many times at them and exchanging it for a word of luxury and perceived superiority.
Understand that you're threatened by him? Because clearly he's everything you want to be. He's good looking and worldly, a legacy at Dartmouth. But even you should know that jealousy clashes with LL Bean Pants.
Even with things that were difficult to deal with, they always had their arms open to welcome her back, to forgive her whatever situation she had put herself through. But all of this support wasn't strong enough to a world that was tempting to her dark side, and she stayed away so many times that made her feel ashamed of herself and pushed away the love and support that the people that loved her wanted to give her, even in the worst situations she's been in.
Hey.
Don't touch me. Don't tell anyone.
She met Asher on the street thinking he was a dog walker. She rejected him until she found out he was a rich guy going to Unity. This was a situation that backfired on Jenny's face since she was looking for status and eventually caught feelings for him until she found out that she got with him and he was using her as a bird to cover his sexuality. She was expecting status and she got that, and nothing else. Instead of getting away from this situation, she kept pretending with Asher to the point that Eric outed him and himself in public, further humiliating Jenny. She was trying in a way to marry up, thinking she will belong to the Upper East Side, when in reality she was going to sign up for a world that would never let her forget where she comes from.
You're Jenny Humphrey from Brooklyn. You need status, access, resources. I give that to you.
Jenny met Damien through Chuck. Damien was thrilling, exciting, handsome, and a new breath of fresh air for Jenny. In a never-ending pursuit of status, she once again got seduced by a life that seemed exciting from the outside. She fell for him because in a way she felt she needed to prove herself to him, which is a pursuit that Jenny never could shake away. The absolute need of seeing herself through other people's eyes is what motivates her to do things other people wouldn't. This got her to the point of trying to lose her virginity with him and him leaving her alone because she didn't feel ready to do so. The constant need of approval makes her derail her ways and never stop having to prove herself even when she has reached the tops that a lot of people would desire. As I explained before, she wanted him, but Damien was just using her for attention and to help him with his deals. He wanted Serena since they went to boarding school together and even tried to get with her, which would help harbor a resentment in Jenny that will end up overflowing with Serena and Nate's relationship. There's not much to say about him since he only showed up in one scene, but there was an attempt made by Jenny to go back to a normal life and create meaningful connections based on mutual interests and appreciation. He did recognize the Jenny that she was before, but she made it clear that she wanted to be a different person.
This isn't the same girl I used to see hanging out on the steps of the Met.
Yeah, well, people change.
Even though Jenny and Nate's relationship was a very short-lived one, I do think it is one of the healthiest relationships she had with a man besides the ones in her family. Nate was very protective of her as a freshman when Jenny was getting into Blair's group. He rescued her several times out of trouble, twice when she was hanging out with Agnes, and he developed a crush on her while Nate was living with the Humphreys, which had to be stopped since Dan and Vanessa found out, and that damaged Vanessa's relationship with Jenny and Nate's with Dan. Nate genuinely cared about her. Even though he's always been living in wealth, he's been appreciative not only towards Jenny, but towards the whole Brooklyn crowd, which is a clear difference and a refreshing change from Chuck and the people he usually hangs out with. In perspective and in ideal conditions, a relationship between them would have been beneficial for both. Jenny would infect Nate with her drive, her wit, resourcefulness, and energy to go his way and achieve his dreams, and Nate would have offered her the protection, care, genuine interest, and status that she was looking for, all without mentioning that they had a good amount of chemistry together. They would have been good for each other if Jenny didn't have this tendency to keep proving herself all the time to everyone else. Jenny doesn't only love Nate for his status and wealth, he's also shown to be dependable and kind towards her, even though in later seasons he ended up treating her more like a little sister than other. The girls at Constance, not only Blair's clique but her own in future seasons, are only relationships out of convenience. Jenny and Blair offer the other girls visibility, and they in exchange offer company and submission, which in this case will make it a parasitic relationship since the queen bee is usually the one who has to sacrifice more to keep her status. We have seen it in Blair and in Jenny while they were both queens of Constance. It's a structure that offers status and in appearance the security of being in a well-known group. It also offers the services and benefits that comes with the people who frequent that group. But in the end, you end up getting stuck into it so much that if you don't have a balancing force, it could eat you up completely and isolating you. Not only confusing power for affection, but at the same time preferring relationships where the imbalance is so heavy that it's hard to recognize who is real with you and who isn't. In Blair's life, the balancing force was Serena. In Jenny's life was Eric, but she ended up rejecting him and even using him to prove her own power over people. Eric was the first genuine friendship Jenny had with the Upper East Side crowd. They genuinely bonded out of their mutual interest in each other's lives, starting with Jenny showing kindness and care to Eric's arrival to Manhattan. Since this was the first friendship she formed on who she was instead of who she was trying to be seen with, it made her relationship with Eric something that had more depth and more support from his part. Eric was one, if not the only close and genuine friendship she had of his age. They showed up to be very supportive of each other from the beginning, but Jenny's tendencies and Eric's unwillingness to turn a blind eye to them made this relationship stray away slowly. Eric is not afraid to be upfront and direct with Jenny, especially when he feels she may be diving headfirst into dangerous territory. He's aware of the world he's living in, and he tries as best as he can to make Jenny aware of this as well. Unsuccessfully most of the times, but he tried. Even after situations that are difficult to forgive, Eric forgives her, not without prevention. He's one of the first to notice Jenny will become power hungry when she became queen. We can see here Eric's concern and love for Jenny and how he knows not only what she's capable of when she had a bad influence, but also what she is as a person and in good company. Even right before she left Manhattan, she tried to support Jenny in a moment where she was weak and crying, and she pushed him away, as she has done many times in the past. Besides her family, Eric is someone who never gave up on her and someone who truly saw Jenny for who she is. In my opinion, this is one of the best things that could happen to Jenny. In Manhattan and growing up with feelings of being undeserving of love and respect and being surrounded by people who do nothing but reinforce that thought, she desperately needed a change of scenery and, most important, a change of social circle. She was involved in an environment that made her act in a cunning way to achieve her success, mostly inspired by Blair, which made her fail and be humiliated several times. Her need for Blair's approval, which she would later admit was because she saw a little of herself in her, would make her follow an example that, due to her lack of experience and connections, will constantly backfire. Through these situations, she would learn, mature, and get to the next phase in her life. There was something about New York and the people she frequented that was in a way consuming her and not allowing her to escape. Especially during season 2, where she was insisting in not being part of the group that caused her so much pain, only to be dragged back to it, to achieve a life that she no longer wants. Since we can see that in the last episode everything worked out for her, in spite of the brief moment in season 4 where her, Vanessa, and Juliet were trying to get revenge on Serena, which in my opinion is a bullshit plot point, but okay, we can say that Jenny leaving the city was more than necessary for her personal and professional growth. We hear occasionally from her family that she's hanging out with people like Alexa Chung in London, which in perspective will be a crowd more akin to her passion for fashion. Plot points like the one that I mentioned before were convoluted and turning a young and confused and needy girl into a nemesis necessary to paint a better light into the wealthy character, which brings me to the next point. Jenny was mostly defined as annoying by the audience. She was the second most hated character for a while, with Vanessa at the top of it. Vanessa for a good reason though. Although it is understandable for the audience to be so dismissive of her, she's one of the characters whose experiences we can mostly relate to. Trying to belong, trying to find your place in the world, being 14 to 16, which are the ages Jenny was, and going through different phases, not only style-wise but in her character as well. Her evolution was criticized by the audience because although at the beginning she was aligning with the preppy girl style that Blair and girls in her clique had, we can see Jenny becoming her own person by adopting more of a dark rocker style and something less edgy but more personalized in season 3, and the episode she appeared in season 4 too. This thanks to Taylor Momsen's personal development that she wanted to impart in her character as well. In my opinion, by rejecting Jenny in favor of characters like Serena, we are in a way rejecting the part of ourselves that is not willing to accept that most of us are not and probably will never be part of that amount of exclusivity. At the same time, finding Blair's conniving and manipulative traits as somehow aspirational, while Jenny's were seen as merely social climbing and therefore wrong. Let's not forget that Blair, being born into wealth as she was too a social climber who tried to marry into royalty at the expense of her own happiness. Blair and Serena were allowed this softness in their character to contrast their more ugly traits, which was removed from Jenny, especially in later seasons. Maybe because the writers were phasing Taylor Momsen out of the show, but I would like to believe that it's also a representation of how jaded she was from trying to keep up with the demands of this world. She became hard, so hard that ended up breaking herself in the process. What has been mentioned before in regards to the poor treatment of Jenny is not only given to her. After season 3, all the characters who came from a humble background were ostracized and given goals that were either to strive and escalate a social ladder to be part of the rich crowd, or to take revenge on them for not letting them into their world. In which case, I wonder why these rich characters who have done horrible things are more favored by the writers and the public instead of the ones we can relate to more. Because let's be honest, most of the audience watching the show can only dream about being a Waldorf, a Vanderwoodsen, or a Bass, because it's not in our reality to relate to them, aside from a merely aspirational perspective. As the show went by, we were being sort of obligated to look at the people in our similar tax bracket as leeches and opportunists who basically, out of chance or resentment, were trying to get back at the people who made them feel oppressed and who, from the beginning, seemed to be taking opportunities that people from the common don't have.
That's because I'm second in our class and you're somewhere around, what, I don't know, last?
No hard feelings, huh?
Why should there be? I mean, how many libraries has your dad had to endow to get you this spot? You've earned it.
Look.
Interesting interesting how the framing became more one-sided, as during that time, being 2007 to 2012, the world was going through a recession who made the difference between social classes even more heightened by it. And yet, Gossip Girl was turning most of its audience against their own kind, through the use of convoluted plot lines that made even the critics be aware of how lazy the writing was becoming as the seasons went by. Although the development of Jenny wasn't linear, because we saw her ups and downs constantly, it's safe to say that in perspective and compared to other characters, Jenny had the most interesting timeline. She's one of the characters who were given a goal, and we saw her striving for it. She was a polarizing character because we saw a division between who she was and who she wanted to become, and I can personally say that this is something that most of us can relate, since it's part of our personal transformation, especially in our mid to late teens. And even more going through the divorce of her parents, her first entrepreneurial endeavor, and her many attempts to climb the social ladder. It's all the things she did to find herself, even if the most of those endeavors weren't successful. I believe that something that we can learn from Jenny is the importance of putting yourself out there, trying, and even in the face of failure, finding out who we really are and what can we become. Through trial and error, we can see what roads are the ones that we can still transit and which ones are the ones that we have outgrown. And to be completely honest with you, I can safely say that Jenny made the show more interesting, more watchable, and for all the dreamers out there, to all the people who dare and who try and who transform to all the process, a character like Jenny made us feel less alone and more inspired. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye bye.